Nobody has been on Tidal Flooding Talk more than our guest tonight, and we are so happy to have him on. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Joined with me, meteorologist Dan Skeldon, Palma Shiles as well. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in partnership with Triax 57, who's powering this broadcast for you on our Tuesday evening. And we are honored to have back on to Tidal Flooding Talk the man who needs no introduction if you're a loyal viewer, Jim Eberwine. Jim, we know that you have a laundry list of titles. I'll run through some of them. Absecon Emergency Manager. You teach a drone class as well. And at ACCC, you're on the New Jersey Emergency Preparedness Association Board, retired National Weather Service forecaster, one of my weather dads, you and Dave Robinson, New Jersey State climatologist, an all-around great guy. Jim, thanks so much for being back on and reclaiming and strengthening your title as the most frequent guest on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Well, that makes me feel old, I'll tell you that, but I thank you very much. And it's good to see Palma. It's good, really good to see Dan and actually see you, and thank you guys so very much.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. I mean, unfortunately, we're not all in person like we usually are at the Irish Pub with you in between Dan and Palma, but we're happy to have you on here virtually. And, I don't even know where to start. Jim, because it has been a while since we rebooted Tidal Flooding Talk. Could you give us an elevator pitch of Jim Eberwine for us?
Well, I hate to say it's been very quiet, because you don't like to say that, because right after you say that, something's going to happen. But I've been staying busy, although retired, traveling around the country doing classes for FEMA and keeping fresh. This is my 58th year in the Weather Service, working with weather. Don't you? 58 years. I'm like, my goodness. So. But anyway, things change every day, Joe, and Dan and Palma know the technology today is just unbelievable. Now we're competing with artificial intelligence, and they're doing pretty good with forecasting, comparing that with the different models, and people are now leaning toward artificial intelligence maps and forecasting. So I don't know how long we're going to last in this business, but it's great. I never knock technology. Sometimes I can't keep up with it. There's so much out there. And sometimes it's really better if I have a grandkid with me, sit next to me and explain things on how to do things with the phone and technology. But it's great. And weather's a great career to get into. And you and Dan have certainly carried the torch after that. So that's pretty cool.
There's a reason why we keep bringing you back on the show. You really do help us educate our viewers on coastal flooding and everything else. It's funny that you say you're retired when you are so active.
Yeah.
Now, how many Irish Pub t-shirts do you still have from being a guest on the show when we were live at the Irish Pub?
I got a slew of them in my closet. I got hats. So I'm ready to go with the Irish Pub.
You're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I wear them and I advertise for the pub, so it's a great spot. It's really a nice, cozy spot, especially when I like it when it's very stormy and it's windy and raining and cold, and you're sitting in there in that pub having a I'll say Diet Coke, but
that's right. You can say what you really
have. We know what you mean.
No, but I'll tell you what, what's really gratifying and to me is to see Dan and to Palma and you, Joe, back again and keeping everybody informed. You guys do a great job.
Yeah, Jim, this is one of those instances where the technology is great. The show has come a long way from when we just put a little cell phone on a tripod at the Irish Pub.
Yeah.
Seeing you on camera there makes me yearn to be back at the Irish Pub, and maybe just in this instance, because Jim Eberwine in person, Jim Eberwine in a Tidal Flooding Talk like this is awesome, but nothing replaces the personal experience. So
I really appreciate that.
My question, you mentioned 58 years. That's something that Joe and I and Palma and her career can only hope to get to. But you mentioned earlier, right off the top, it's been a quiet year. In your 58 years, if you can think back to all of them, has it been unusually quiet, like top 10 quiet, where we haven't had any nor'easters, we've hardly had any coastal flood warnings or advisories? It's been kind of eerily, but blessedly quiet from fall through the winter and now into the spring as well.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Dan, because with this little shortwave that's coming through, I think Friday and Saturday, and now I think we have a full moon coming up in a day or two, something. We may for the first time in a long time mention, oh, maybe minor tidal flooding. It may inch up to moderate because the winds will be gusting in off the ocean. But I went back to just January 1st. I didn't go back to the beginning of winter, but just January 1st, looking at our wind rows for Atlantic City, the winds have been out of the northwest just about 95% of the time. Hardly anything coming from the east, which is indicative of an absence of nor'easters. So that's been good. But like the police always tell me, I'll walk in there and say, oh, it's a quiet day. Jim, never say quiet, never say quiet. So the same thing in weather. It's been very, very quiet. And when I was driving to the conference today, the back bays were a little swollen. So I think maybe by Friday you'll see something mention of a minor tidal flooding event, something like that. But for the most part, we're doing really, really good. Really, and you see what's happening in the Midwest. They're just being devastated, absolutely devastated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been a shame there. And, we're talking about the flooding. This is going to be, we're listening, everyone's listening to this after what the flooding you're talking about, which is on the 11th and 12th of April as we're recording this. But Dan, I think, I think there's been just two things that have been unusual, and that's drought, one, right? And then it's been windy, but
Yep.
We'll take that. I mean, we'll take the windy, and the drought is going away each and every week. And, Jim, I mean, last extending back to last fall, we didn't really have any tropical systems hit us either. Not even a remnant storm. You can go, I don't know, when was the last time we had like multiple coastal storms or tropical systems hit us? I mean, it would have to, I think it has to be back to last spring.
Yeah. I think that, well, you let me know about this, Joe. Probably one of the most exciting things that happened was when we dropped 35 degrees at Belmar.
Yes.
And that actually had something attack us from the northeast, the backdoor front. So I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It was. I have this. I pulled up the stats here. So March 29th, 2025 at Monmouth County Airport. It's Belmar, as it's known as. It was tied for the second biggest 1 hour drop of all time going back to the 1950s there. So it went from 77 degrees to 45 degrees in 1 hour. And in a 5-minute stretch, it went from 72 to 57. And it just, I live in Monmouth County. It literally, it went from summer to winter like that. Now, Jim, I'm trying to remember, in Absecon, you got it, but it wasn't as pronounced down there.
No, we didn't. In fact, we didn't get it until later in the day.
Yeah.
We didn't get that drop so it wasn't as drastic going from a sunny situation and warm to cold. But I'll tell you what, if you get that in May, if you get that backdoor front in May, I guarantee you're going to see severe weather. We didn't have any severe weather with this time, but I guarantee you will see, when you have that kind of temperature drop, you'll see a line of strong convection moving south with it, because then your ambient temperature outside is going to be 90, 95, maybe in May or June.
Yeah. Well, it was super above average that day for sure.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back on the other side. We got plenty more with Jim Eberwine. You're listening to Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We're here tonight with Jim Eberwine. And Jim was on the show, Tidal Flooding Talk, multiple times. And, Jim, I always reference something that you said on one of the very first episodes, and that was that what's new, unique to New Jersey is that we have tidal flooding year round. It is a year round threat. Now, with such a mild season with flooding, do you feel that people may forget that?
You're 100% correct. In fact, when I was at the conference today, not only are people forgetting, but I think they're going to cut back funds on some of the emergency management programs. And the reason is, and it's unfortunate, when you have these episodes of quiet weather, that area seems to be impacted with less attention and less funding. Everything now is all the attention now is to the west of us. We've been very quiet here on the coast, and you're seeing what's happening in Asheville last year. Now you're seeing, I think they've already declared 5 FEMA or presidential declarations for 5 states out there in the Midwest. So it all depends. If you have a very active season, then the funds are going to be there for mitigation of upcoming years. But it's unfortunate. I hate to say that you need a disaster every once in a while to keep people on their toes, but you're right. Memories are short. A lot of people now have forgotten about Sandy. A lot of
Right.
people have.
That sounds like a double-edged sword, It's like we
Right.
don't want it to be active with, coastal flooding, but at the same time, we also don't want people to forget that it is a threat here.
Right, absolutely. So, what you guys are doing is, you may think you're not making any headway, but to the people who really need the information, who live at the shore, you're doing a dynamite job, because I hear that when I go out to conferences and things, that yeah, there are people watching your back, even though nothing has been happening. In the event something does happen, they'll just jump right into action. So you guys through the Coastal Coalition are really you're really setting the pace for preparedness, even different from the emergency managers. So it's a good thing you're doing. Good thing you're doing.
Well, Jim, you mentioned like in the event if something happens. Well, it's been a quiet nor'easter season. We're coming up on hurricane season as we get
Right.
through the spring and work towards summer. Colorado State comes out with their forecast, slightly above average. They've been really good with trying to peg those numbers. It's how active a season, as you know, we've had some skill predicting where the storms go. Of course, that's still kind of a fool's errand. Do you have any thoughts as the start of hurricane season comes up on June 1st? Have you looked into anything? Is it looking to be an active year? Is it looking to be perhaps an East Coast year?
Well, a lot of attention. Remember last year, the hurricane predictions came out as early as February, and it was supposed to be one heck of a season. Well, it was down in the Gulf. Yeah, things do change, as you know, Dan. Things will be shifting. It may be more of an impactful year on the East Coast this year. Things are shifting a little bit to the east. Will there be as many storms? I think I saw 1 or 2 forecasts early. Not as many storms, but still could be impactful. And now you're not dealing with the Gulf; you're dealing with the East Coast. You know what the number one topic has been over the years, last couple of years, I should say, is not so much Sandy, it's Ida. Ida has been the big story on a lot of these things I'm saying and conversations I'm in, because Ida killed 6 people in New Orleans or Louisiana, 6 people. We had what, 65 in New Jersey and New York? I mean, that's unprecedented. Wasn't it that?
Yeah, it was about, I don't know the exact number, but it was high. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's unprecedented. I can't remember a storm making landfall 150 miles an hour and having 6 direct deaths, and then the indirect deaths up here were 10 times more. So it's that's what, and what's his name? I don't want to say what's his name. I know Dave Robinson.
What's his name? That state climatologist guy.
That state climatologist. Yeah, Dave. He's the one that's been headlining the preparedness for events like Ida, because I saw him at the conference a couple of years ago. But what was interesting, and I know you guys follow it, is if Ida had come after 2 months of dry weather, it would not have been a big deal. But the 2 months prior to Ida, you had 5 to 6 inches above normal in one month, then you had 5 to 6 inches above normal in the next month, and then here comes Ida with what, 7 inches, something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, of course. And I have some unfortunate figures on the fatalities. This is from New Jersey 101.5. During Ida in 2021, we had 23 fatalities in New Jersey alone. So not, you said New York, New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
And New York had more, but 23 and just from New Jersey alone. And Sandy had 34, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, it was definitely a very significant weather event. And you know, like, you know, we know that this show is focused on the Jersey Shore and, you know, historically down towards Atlantic City, where Ida wasn't that big of a deal. But it was a very big deal. The northern part of the state and in New York City, even parts of Monmouth County saw 4 or 5 inches of rain in a short period of time. And yeah, we're you know, hopefully you don't have that. And again, as you said, Jim, sometimes you need one of those unfortunate major kind of storms to keep it fresh in your mind, because Sandy, you know, look, if you're 20 years old or younger, you don't have much of a recollection of Sandy right now.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's interesting when you look at North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and you look out what's happening out there now. The one thing to remember is God creates flash floods, but man creates flash flood disasters. Because what we do is we build sometimes where we shouldn't build. Our infrastructure is old. If you look at, you know, there's something like 6,200 bridges in New Jersey. There's 231 dams. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I've only been over maybe a handful of bridges. Where the heck are all these bridges at? But if you look at the infrastructure in New Jersey, we're a small state, but we're a very populated state. So what we give up in intensity in these storms, we make up in population, especially when we get north of that Trenton-Toms River line. Everything, you got congestion like crazy, and it only takes Sandy near a Category 1, and look what happened. Over what's the price tag now in New Jersey? Over 60 billion or 55 billion or some crazy
Something
thing
like that. Yeah.
So New Jersey is a very unique state, but and here's a good point too. I go out and when I talk, I tell people high pressure controls the weather. High pressure, right? That's what controlled Sandy. But look at the high pressure that's been sitting over the East Coast for the last week and a half. And what has it been doing? It's been keeping everything west.
Yeah.
Everything feeding up out of the Gulf, fueling that training echoes up through Kentucky and Tennessee and Missouri, and they've been getting blasted. While the high pressure sits over us, and we get these dew points of 10 degrees and stuff.
Yeah, it's been chapstick alert weather for sure. And you know, last fall that high pressure was keeping us. That's why we had the driest month on record going back to 1895 in New Jersey, because that high pressure was locked in and keeping that storm track in northern New England, Ontario, Canada, and the West. Meanwhile, we averaged 0.02 inches of rain in New Jersey in October. And I don't know if, you know, who knows the next time we see something like that again. But we got to cut the break one more time, Jim. We're going to come back with you. We got a whole nother 9 minutes with Jim Eberwine. We're looking forward to all 9 minutes of it. We'll be right back on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Welcome back to this edition of Tidal Flooding Talk, along with my co-host Palma Shiles and meteorologist Joe Martucci. Is everyone our favorite guest, and I think the most requested guest. I don't think we've officially compiled stats, but I'm pretty confident in saying the most requested guest, meteorologist, retired, and of course, as Palma said, we use that word loosely. Jim Eberwine. Jim, such a pleasure to have you here.
I deeply appreciate all you're saying.
I wanted to follow up one thing too with you're talking about like how the northwest wind has been such the dominant wind direction throughout the winter, throughout the spring, and therefore the lack of tidal flooding. Do you have any thoughts as to is that pattern going to continue, and like what that means down the road as spring turns into summer? Does it mean more severe weather potentially if it were to continue? Does it mean maybe the drought reappearing? Is it a drier wind in spring and summer? Let's just like assume that continues since it's been pretty consistent. What is our future?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was in Westchester 2 weeks ago, there were wildfire experts over there. They have never seen so many wildfires in Pennsylvania as they're seeing now. And they said that was a carryover from last year. They had the same kind of setup. Again, high pressure controls the weather. If you get that high a little farther offshore, then everything that's happening out there is going to shift this way. And will that happen? See, that's always the question, Dan. That's always the question. What is going to be the major contributor? But this year was supposed to be a relatively strong La Nina. I think it hasn't even reached what, 0.5 or 0.6, something like that, the index. So that's a major global indicator. Are we going to stay in that? And if we do, we may have this extended dry into the late spring, early summer. But for us, I don't know. It's a tough call on the East Coast because we're battling what's happening just to our east, the ocean, and the oceans are a little bit warmer. If you look at the oceans today, I was just looking at Rutgers. Man, it's very cold out there. It's very cold out there, and here it is, the middle of April. So that's going to take what, a 2.5-month lag to warm up. And until it does, you may have like a semi-permanent high pressure sitting there, not far enough offshore that's going to give you sticky southwesterly winds and the early Bermuda high type weather. But yeah, it's a toss up. It's really one of the most important things that I hear a weather person say, and I've heard you say it sometimes, and I heard Joe say it sometimes, is I really don't know. That's it.
No, I never say that.
Yeah. That's a very tough thing to say when people come after you and say, hey, what's going to happen? You should know. And you say, gosh, I don't know. They're so disappointed.
Yeah.
I say it all the time, Jim, except to my wife, but I say it all the time repeatedly anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is, like, during this, we're getting into that thunderstorm, those pop-up thunderstorm season, and people just want to know, is it going to rain at my house?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean,
right.
I know that there's going to be a few thunderstorms around, at the shore, but I don't know if it's going to hit Margate, if it's going to hit Seaside Park, or if it's going to hit Monmouth Beach. I that's hard to know. And then in the weather apps, which look, 75% of the time your weather app's fine, but your weather app's going to give you an answer and a more definitive answer, but it doesn't always mean it's the right answer. Right. And it's just, you brought up AI in the beginning, Jim, and I wanted to make this point a little bit earlier, but AI is here. I use AI, and AI is going to continue to infiltrate, right? But just like when you call an 877 or an 800 number, why are you calling them? To talk to a human. You're not just doing it just to go through the prompts, right? There's always going to be that need for that human touch. And that's why we love having you on. That's why people love seeing you on here, Jim, because you're the human touch. There's no AI Jim Eberwine yet, at least not the one that I know of. You might have something cooking, but I don't know of any.
Well, let me tell you.
I think Jim Eberwine is one of the few things AI cannot recreate.
There you go.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned 800 and 877. I've been on those numbers today with Social Security. And I'll tell you, you get on there and you have to wait and wait and wait and wait. And when you hear I get so excited when I hear someone say, hello, can I help you? And I'm thinking, whoa, this is really cool. That's a human.
It's a real person.
Yeah, but it's funny you should mention that. But back in the day, you could call the weather service, and if it rang more than 3 times, that was a lot. I mean, we were always jumping on the phone, picking it up and talking to people. But as you know, things change, and it's kind of a shame that you really can't talk to a person. I had a guy tell me, he says he met me not too long ago, and he said, God, you're the first weather person I ever talked to or ever met. And I'm thinking, wow, that's crazy. Pick up the phone and you can call me or something like that. But yeah, it's everything now is you call up and then you got press 1 for this, press 2 for this. But again, I'm not knocking technology. Sometimes I wish I was born 15 years later to take advantage of all this technology. But you still have, and both of you still have, when you make a forecast, something called the gut feeling.
Yeah.
You have that gut feeling, and that's the human element of the forecast. When I first came in 72, actually I started in 68 with the Marines and weather. In 72, 80% of the forecast, or 85% of the forecast, or maybe even 90, were still done by forecasters. But now it's reversed. So, but that's technology.
Yeah. We could do a whole nother episode with you, Jim, and we probably will. We'll probably ask at some point to talk about what was weather forecasting like when you were starting out and comparing it to how it is now. And I'd be really interested in your take on social media and the benefits and the negatives that you might be aware of in the weather world. But we do have to wrap it up for this episode. A half hour goes like that, Jim. I'm telling you.
Well, I got to tell you something real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Dan and I were in Ocean City. I think it was the early summer of 2012, and Dan and I were in Ocean City, and people were asking about hurricanes, and it looked like nothing was going to happen. And I remember Dan saying, "Well, we've got September to go through, and things could change." And what happened in 2012?
Sandy.
Over.
Remember that, Dan?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed the year until you said yes, Sandy, but absolutely, yeah. Things can change on a dime, and as you always say, it just takes one storm. There could be 20 storms out on the ocean, and it's a busy season, but nothing happens. It could be one or two storms, and they hit the right spots, and they hit the coast, and it's a bad season.
Yeah.
Now,
And then
one
they
last
rain.
question for you, Jim, to
What?
close out the show. We keep saying Sandy. We don't really say Superstorm Sandy, and I'm kind of interested in what your take is with how it changed from a hurricane to superstorm and how you feel about that.
Well, we could do a whole show on that, but what happened was the National Hurricane Center felt, along with the forecasters in headquarters along the East Coast, that at some point Sandy was going to come up out of the Bahamas and it was going to lose its tropical DNA and transition into a extratropical. They used to call them extratropical storms, but about 610 miles southeast of Atlantic City was going to transition into more like a winter storm. The post-tropical tag that it had is something that was used primarily by the Canadian Hurricane Center, because when you do get above New York, you're pretty much into an extratropical storm. It's got more winter-like characteristics. It starts to lose the warmth below, and it transitions from a tropical to a post-tropical. That was, and both of you guys remember, and you remember too, Palmer, that it was a little bit confusing as it was coming up because the Weather Service was educating us about a post-tropical storm. And I think they only used that once or twice before. The first time was a couple of years before that. So it's very confusing to a lot of people. But that discussion is going to go on for many, many years, right, Dan, Joe? It's going to go on for many, many years because the Hurricane Center had their idea, and then headquarters and the East Coast offices had theirs, and that's why you saw so many winter type bulletins going out with that storm.
Yep.
So we could talk an entire program about Sandy and that tag that was given to it post tropical.
Yeah, I mean, there's books that have chapters centered around that. It's something that, like you said, will be discussed for a while. Anyway, Jim, we thank you so much for coming on. It's really special to always have you on here, Tidal Flooding Talk, especially now in our new iteration of it. We might have to do an episode with you at the Irish Pub just for old time's sake. But thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's really an honor for me to be sitting here with you three. It really is, and I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Palmer. You keep these guys straight, Palmer.
I'll try. I'm trying.
Try. All right. Well, for the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, Dan Skeldon, Palmer Shiles, and myself, Joe Martucci, we thank you for watching Tidal Flooding Talk, powered by Tri-X 57. We'll see you next Tuesday on your favorite device, talking all things coastal resiliency.